Hello, and welcome back to another episode recap where I'll lay out 5 things that I learned from my conversation with a historical expert. And today, we'll talk about the movie Young Guns. Now, if you're a regular listener of the audio version of the Based on a True Story podcast, you'll know that I had Chris Wimmer on the show to talk about the accuracy of the movie. Chris is the producer and host of 2 very popular historical podcasts, Legends of the Old West and Infamous America. Season 3 of Infamous America dives into the real life of Billy the Kid, which is, of course, the subject of the movie Young Guns. Well, that episode with Chris was over an hour long, so if you don't have the time to listen to the whole thing yet, well, that's why I'm here today in this video to recap 5 things that I learned about the movie Young Guns from Chris Wimmer. So let's get started. Number 1, the feud between John Tunstall and L.G. Murphy. The movie shows a feud between John Tunstall and L.G. Murphy, and the reason for it that the movie shows is for it being over beef or cattle. That basic idea is true. John Tunstall moved to Lincoln trying to take over some of the contracts that L.G. Murphy had with the government to supply beef to the army and to the nearby Apache reservation. So when Tunstall showed up trying to take a cut of that business, that's when the feud started. Although Chris pointed out that there was another character in the real feud that is hardly in the movie, Jimmy Dolan. It was Dolan who was Murphy's protege and one of the key people organizing a lot of the things that we actually see in the movie, a lot of the attempts to push Tunstall out of Lincoln. It was Dolan who was organizing a lot of that. And when Murphy and Dolan were not able to actually push Tunstall out, that's when the feud turned violent. Number 2. Tunstall's age. John Tunstall is played by Terrence Stamp in the movie. Since Stamp was born in 1938 and Young Guns came out in 1988, we can assume Stamp was around 50 years old when he was in the movie. Maybe a little bit younger depending on when they actually filmed the movie compared to when it was released. And this kind of gives the sense that Tunstall was almost a father figure to a lot of those characters. Now, in our discussion, Chris pointed out that one big discrepancy in the movie is how old the real John Tunstall was. He was only 23 years old when he came to Lincoln and 24 by the time the events of the movie took place. Number 3, the Regulators as deputies. After the feud between the Murphy-Dolan faction and Tunstall ended up costing Tunstall his life, the movie was correct in showing that Billy the Kid, who worked for Tunstall, was part of the group that also used to work for him that were deputized to bring in those responsible for Tunstall's killing. But Chris pointed out that of the warrants that they were given to try and find and bring those people to justice, the Regulators didn't really bring any of them in, although they did kill some of them. So it would seem that they were really going out for revenge instead of serving those warrants and bringing them in for justice. Number 4, Billy the Kid's nickname. Today, we know the name Billy the Kid, but Chris told me that nickname was mostly an invention of the newspapers, not something that he was really called within the gang itself. He was called the Kid or Billy Bonnie, but never really Billy the Kid until a newspaper editor printed it. From there, it grew, but even then, Chris said it wasn't really something that took on this grand mythological nickname that we think of today until they started writing dime novels about Billy the Kid some 20 to 50 years after his life. Number 5, Billy the Kid's revenge on Murphy. At the very end of the movie, Billy the Kid manages to escape a massive shootout with Murphy's men. Then, in a Hollywood moment, Emilio Estevez's version of Billy, as he's on his horse, he's riding out of town, he turns back and then shoots Jack Palance's version of L.G. Murphy from down the street. It's a shot that instantly kills Murphy and also serves as revenge for Murphy's having Tunstall killed that we saw earlier in the movie. But, as Chris told me, that didn't happen. There really was a shootout at the home of Alec McSween, but it really wasn't Murphy who was leading the fight against the Regulators. It was a man that I mentioned earlier, Murphy's protege, Jimmy Dolan. As for Murphy himself, he ended up drinking himself to death later on, so not anything related to the shootout at all. that's all for today, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode recap of 5 things that I learned from Chris Wimmer about the movie Young Guns. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the episode with Chris is over an hour long, so we talked about a lot more than I've covered in this recap. So if you want to hear the full interview with Chris, go check out the audio podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/146. Once again, that's basedonatruestorypodcast.com/146. And don't forget to check out Chris's podcast that goes into amazing details about what we know now as the Lincoln County War and Billy the Kid. The name of his podcast is Infamous America, and it's season number 3 that you want to look for that covers the life of Billy the Kid, although he has some great content over there, no matter which season you want to listen to. In the meantime, for more recaps and full-length episodes of Based on a True Story, hit that subscribe button right now, and thanks for watching.